Okay, I think we're live here. So I'm here with Kirk Williams and Elliot Kemp. How you guys doing?
Doing well.
Good. Good. Thanks, Jill. Good to be here.
Glad to hear it. I'm also glad to be here as well. I have to say it's not my first webinar, but it's my first time hosting, so it's an interesting experience for me. What about you guys? Is this your first with Semrush?
I've done one as I think I was joining in as a consultant or whatever. Someone else was presenting, and I answered questions and showed my Star Wars Legos in the background.
Yep. You have the nicest background I've seen in a while, I have to say that.
Yeah, and for me, this is actually my first webinar either internally at Hannapin or externally. So definitely looking forward to it and happy that it's with Semrush for sure. It's going to be a good time.
That's great. That's great. Where are you guys located, by the way? I know Hannapin's in Illinois, right? Bloomington.
Bloomington, Indiana. So I work on. Yeah, no. Hey, they're close
Same
together, right?
thing.
I get my eyes confused.
Yeah, but I work on site at the Bloomington office, but many of our team is full-time remote, so we have people all over the country. But yeah, our one office is in Bloomington, Indiana.
That's great. That's great. And where are you at?
We're in the grand city of Billings, Montana. So out west.
That's great.
Yeah.
Montana, I've never been there.
It's beautiful.
That's good. Okay. Well, we're still waiting, of course. We need some more people to join before we start. So we already have some people who are starting to watch. I'm curious, for everyone watching, feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat on YouTube, and it'd be great to know where you're from as well. In fact, actually, I already see that Kirk has a fan. Mark Lee he's an admirer. He's heard you speak before at MKE Search in Milwaukee.
Ah, cool.
I guess that must have done well.
Yeah, we discussed upcoming things to be aware of in 2018 with paid search marketing. So various things about automation and things like that. So
okay. Also, okay. So we have someone from Cornwall, UK. We have William Rock from Kansas City. We have Lisa Johnson from Minnesota.
Minnesota. I grew up in Minnesota, Minneapolis area.
Right. Oh, and I'm getting some reports that my voice isn't clear. Is that better?
That is better.
I had to adjust my Apple earrings. So I think maybe that helped. Okay, wow. And Prince Albert, Canada, Toronto, Canada, Dallas, Texas. That's quite an audience we have here.
Hershey, Pennsylvania. I've been to Hershey at the chocolate factory. There is actually a chocolate factory in Hershey.
Yeah, I think they named the chocolate after the city. Or the city after the chocolate.
Yeah, I don't remember the connection, but it's something.
No, it was the chocolate first, I think. We have someone from South Florida. I'm actually originally from Florida. Right now I'm living in Tel Aviv, and I'm here hosting. We have Tiago from Brazil, which is cool. I've been to Brazil. I spent quite some time there. Oi, Tiago, tudo bem? Como vai? Many other Brazilians out there. Okay, so I think we're going to start in about a minute or so. So joining us today, so for those of you who are just coming in, is Kirk Williams and Elliot Kemp. Kirk is the owner of Zato. He has a paid and search social PPC micro agency of experts and has been working in digital marketing since 2009. He's been named one of the top 25 most influential PPCers in the world by PPC Hero. So he is, quite the expert, and I think we're all privileged to hear him speak today. He also hosts the weekly PPC chat on Twitter as well, and he's also an avid conference speaker, traveling all over the world in the US and UK to talk about paid advertising, particularly search and shopping ads. Also joining us today is Elliot Kemp. He's an account manager at Hampton in Marketing, which is an industry-leading digital advertising agency based in Bloomington, Indiana. He has expertise running e-commerce campaigns spanning across several industries and verticals, as well as a wide variety of business sizes. So I'm excited to have both of you guys presenting today, and really look forward, to hear what you have to offer us. So we have two presenters, as I said before, and we'll be starting first with Kirk. So Kirk, whenever you're ready, you can take over, share your presentation, and we'll begin.
Sounds good. Let me go ahead and switch over to that. Alrighty. So we're going to be discussing the 2 steps crucial to e-commerce PPC in 2018. And what I'm going to talk about specifically is my favorite topic. It is shopping ads. So shopping ads, the first thing you should know is they're important. All right, so yeah, we all know that. But shopping ads are growing in importance, and I think it's really crucial to understand the role that they play in e-commerce PPC. I'll still run into accounts where definitely a lot more traffic and spend is going towards shopping ads, or I'm sorry, going towards search than shopping. And more than likely, because of where your competition is spending, more and more industry surveys and that are going out discussing how in e-commerce PPC, a lot more competitor spend is going towards shopping, a lot more time and energy. Google and Bing are showing shopping ads results. Obviously we've all seen SERPs continue to increase with shopping at the top of them. Shopping is really an important and significant thing in 2018 e-commerce PPC. So that's why I wanted to speak on that. In order to kind of distill lots and lots and lots of things that we could talk about with shopping into 15 minutes, I just picked 2 things. So I'm sorry if these are not the 2 things you wanted me to talk about. That's too bad. Maybe you can get Semrush to do another shopping webinar. But the 2 things that we're going to discuss in 2018 about shopping. Also, just to warn you, yes, I do like Star Wars and I like Legos, so we'll be having those in the presentation. Again, unapologetically. One time someone got upset at me in a presentation because I had lots of Star Wars stuff, and I thought, well, I'm sorry. It's who I am. So number 1, the first thing for shopping ads is organizing your campaigns by query. Okay, so I think this is really, really crucial to understand. If you're going to do shopping well, you need to look past just putting up a campaign and letting Google and Bing automation do their thing. And you need to begin to separate out various query groupings by user intent so that you can bid on them. This is not really what you normally can do in shopping. So in some ways, it's almost a little bit of a hack. I use that word somewhat tentatively because I don't like when the word hack is used to describe something best practice, but in some ways it is a little bit of one. We're going to use things like priority settings and that to send shopping to where we want it to go. All right, so here's kind of why. This is important to understand because with text ads, with search bids, right? What we're doing is we are setting a CPC, we're setting a bid, which means we have identified and attributed some level of value. We're setting that based on a keyword. A keyword is matched up to a search query, which means we are identifying this person out there in the internet land. They actually told us, I am interested in this. So let's say for the sake of argument, they want to purchase one of your toy lightsabers that you sell. So they type that in. You identify that because they're telling you that, they're revealing their buying intent to you basically, and you can adjust bids according to that. So someone's saying, I want to buy this toy Force FX lightsaber, that has a higher buying intent than just someone typing in the word light stick. And therefore with text ads, that's why you set higher CPCs, right? Basic stuff, text ad, basic search stuff. The reason that's important to know is in shopping, it's not the same way. So in shopping, you are not setting bids according to a keyword or query level. You are setting bids according to a product. So the product is then attached by Google or Bing, then that's attached to varying levels of buying intent queries that are searched for. Thus, you're kind of really, you're basically putting all of your trust and faith and hope in Google and Bing and the fact that they will accurately match up your product bid, your one max CPC that you've set for this product group, that they'll match that up with all of the possible query intents. And so in this strategy, what you need to do is you need to start to identify, hey, there are differing levels of buying intent. I like to group it around the buying funnel. So thinking in terms of, there are generic top of funnel terms out there, and then there are maybe some mid funnel research phase. Someone's a little bit more interested in purchasing. So rather than just typing in toy lightsaber, maybe they're typing in the specific brand of lightsaber, Force FX. You identify that you're willing to bid a little bit more, and then maybe they go on in actually then going past that and saying, I want to buy this exact specific type of lightsaber. So what you do in this shopping organization is you actually start to pull out those query groupings based upon their buying intent, and perhaps where they are in the funnel as well. And you separate those into individual campaigns so that you actually can now set unique bids according to them. And so what that looks like is where all of your competition is just tossing up this one shopping campaign where they're setting their max CPC bids, and all of their budget is getting sucked up with all of the generic terms out there. What you're doing is you're ensuring that your budget is devoted with higher CPCs to the terms that are more likely to convert. Okay, so let me illustrate by using like Heaven's Nectar coffee. All right, so I love coffee. This is a Chemex coffee maker. Pour over is the way to go if you're making coffee. All right, so with coffee, think of it in terms of like all of those grounds at the top. They're really important, but at some point you still need to filter that down. You need to filter like really what you're interested in getting, that sweet nectar of life, the coffee. That's what is more valuable. And so in this strategy, you have a high priority campaign at the top that is basically catching more of those generic type queries. All right, and if you have a sharp eye, you've probably seen that I sarcastically have thrown something in here like the exact match Amazon, because if you run shopping campaigns, you possibly have seen the exact match Amazon in your campaigns, as I have, and you had to exclude it. You know, again, great job, Google algorithm. But what this does is you have this top level campaign, and that catches these generic queries, and then you add the let's say the brand terms or the SKU terms, or you don't have to think just brand and SKU. Maybe you have these top converting queries, and what you can do then is you actually will add those as negatives into that high priority campaign, and that's what allows those better queries to filter down to the next level. So it's a little confusing, admittedly, because in some ways your higher value terms are actually more in those lower priority campaigns. Now, this is quite a bit to kind of do and figure out, but again, I promise you that you're the good guy, Ahsoka Tano, and you're in the you've been able to pull out your awesome best value queries and bid higher on them, which means you're going way past the enemy where all of your competition is, which is just being stuck in this, throwing all of their budget at all of the queries in the world. And I do promise that if you set it up well, very likely you will see higher ROAS, you will see this profit come through. So this is kind of complex. If you're used to it, if you're already doing it, fantastic. But if you're not doing it, or if you've been thinking about jumping in or giving it a try, you can use this walkthrough that I created a few years back, actually, but it's still good. It really walks you through exactly what I presented, and in way, way more detail. Kind of walks you through, this is how you do it. But what I've found is definitely segmenting your campaigns by query so that you are bidding according to value in the funnel and value for the query. Honestly, you're going to see better results because you're better controlling the bid and your budget. So that's my first big shopping tip. My second one is somewhat based in this model, but it's going into how you're attributing value and then thinking about the account success overall. And so the second thing that I want us to get up in 2018 Google and Bing shopping ads, the second thing would be start thinking about identifying where your campaigns are as you've segmented out with your queries based on your user funnel. And you're very probably familiar with that. What I just mean basically is the user funnel in terms of, hey, are they just starting on the journey of thinking through what do I need? You know, maybe I'm interested in lightsaber, what have you, and then you get more down the funnel in buying intent to something like research. Now they're starting to consider maybe where they're going to purchase from, or maybe what type of product more likely. And then as you get further down towards the bottom of the funnel, it usually looks more like, hey, I figured out this is the specific product I want. Now where am I going to purchase from? And so what I would suggest is, because of shopping ads, we'll talk a little bit about that, but because of that, you do need to definitely go beyond a single model of attribution in just looking at your shopping ads in general. The quick, if you're not familiar with attribution, there's lots of stuff online about it. So dig in and kind of get an understanding of what it is. It's very simply the idea of how do you track like which source attributed the value, like someone converted, someone purchased something on your website. How do you determine which sources sent that value? That's attribution. It's complicated. Most of the time, we like to stick to a single model. We figure, hey, this is how we're going to track attribution. And a lot of analytics, especially if you utilize Google Analytics, is last click. Google Analytics is last click non-direct. And what that means is the very last source to send you the sale gets 100% of the traffic. And here's where it applies very specifically to shopping, and that is that shopping ads very often is not weighted towards the bottom of the funnel. Shopping ads is very much a research and early stage and mid-funnel research. You definitely have a lot of price comparisons. You have a lot of people trying to figure out that stage of the funnel, but it's still valuable. But if you're just looking with a last click model at all of your shopping ads, you very likely are going to undervalue the actual value that shopping is bringing overall to the business, and that goes with any channel, especially. So here's I think the way, at least I was going to say the way to solve this. Let's be clear that solving attribution quotation marks is very we're a long way from that still, in my opinion, if it's even possible at all, because I think there's a lot of even emotion and internal decision making that happens that can't just be tracked through an algorithm. However, I do think we can get a little bit further down the path of analyzing this and reporting and kind of getting directional information with setting bids and shopping. And that is, as we've segmented out our queries, as I talked about in the first one, as we've segmented those out into, let's say, top of funnel terms or bottom of funnel terms, we're starting to get an idea of where the users are coming. Then I would suggest using actual different models then in your reporting, and as you're analyzing things to make bidding decisions, utilizing different models that fits with where those shopping campaigns are in the funnel. And by the way, you can't do this unless you've segmented all those queries out. So that's why step one of this little session is really important. But once you do that, then you can pull those generic, that high priority, those really generic queries, pull those in and maybe actually utilize a first click model to analyze the success of that campaign. Last click is really going to undervalue the generic campaign, but hey, there might actually be a lot of traffic it is starting and sending. Mid-funnel, always going to be the tough one. Someone in this case isn't just typing in TV, they're typing in, maybe they're starting to compare Sony TVs versus Vizio or what have you. Sony versus Samsung. This is a little more difficult. Mid-funnel, definitely we see a lot of a lot of terms, a lot of funnel terms that don't always fit into an exact specific designation. That's okay, you know. Just keep an eye on things. Maybe consider like a time delay or a position-based model. And then finally, Then if you like your last click model, I think you can actually still utilize it for the low priority campaign, which is maybe your SKU level terms that you've thrown in there and that you're bidding on. Or even, I would argue, RLSA oftentimes fits more towards a bottom of funnel approach. So this is one of the reasons I actually like to segment out RLSA and shopping, because then I'm taking more mid to bottom of funnel. I'm not visitors. I'm not mixing them with my top of funnel people. And then I can utilize more of like a last click model to analyze that. So in this one, the big idea here is just, as you've segmented out your campaigns by query intent and by the funnel, now utilize unique attribution models to set bids accordingly. So those are my two thoughts on really doing shopping well. My name is Kirk. Again, I own Zeta. We're a paid search organization. You can find us there at our website. And thanks for being here. I'm going to hand it back to Joel now.
Hey, Kirk, that was actually really informative. I got a lot out of it. By the way, if anyone has any questions, we have time, very little time for one or two. We would like to move on to Elliot so that way he has time to make his presentation, and afterwards we could address more. So if anyone has anything that they would like to ask, feel free. I know off the top of my head, though, I had quite a few questions, if I may. One of them was
Sure.
regarding the manual bidding. So you're saying, I remember what you're saying is that bidding is done based on the product, not the actual search query itself. I'm wondering if you're using an automated bidding strategy, does Google then adjust bidding based on the search query itself? Like, do they, look at those extra dimensions? I mean, do we know that?
I don't know that. I would assume they do, just because Google definitely is doing a lot with queries, and even the changes they just made to exact match, where that's this last week, where it's involving intent, right? So that is to me an example of how they can use intent. I would hope they are making those decisions based upon that. For the most part, I've found that even with that, even supposing that their algorithms are doing that, I found most of the time we can absolutely destroy the old ways of doing things by switching to this campaign. So probably they're doing some of that. It doesn't mean we can't get a little bit better doing it manually at this point, I found.
Okay. And your attribution modeling, I found to be very interesting as well. Talking about how you, adjust your attribution modeling based on the stages they are in the decision-making funnel. Do you base your decisions at all on? Do you ever use the search funnel report to maybe adjust your strategy? Is that relevant?
Yes, I have. Total transparency, I'm still kind of figuring this aspect of it out even more, right? Like not just, to me, the question is, okay, as we start looking at where these are in the funnel now, how does that specifically guide our decisions? Because that's part of it. It's not just about us having fun talking about these things ideologically and then going back and sending bids. Nothing to do with it. So, I do think that's probably something to investigate and work with. So sometimes how I'm doing it practically is I have one client where we actually have two different analytics platforms, and basically we're utilizing one that is based on first click and one that is based on, I think with them, AdWords, we have the DDA running, data driven. We have analytics based on last click, and then we have Adobe based on first click. So that being one example of ways that you can, I think the key is thinking about attribution bidding in a directional way, and not hey, this is 100% the exact perfect model, and this is exactly how it applies, and we need to do that every time, but almost more like directionally. And I think that's what I mean in terms of, hey, how directionally are we doing in these campaigns with the first click model that matches with them in that regard. So,
I mean, I found it very fascinating. And I mean, to me, it does kind of sound like Google doesn't have a perfect product here in a way, because they don't give you full control. And like you said, you did kind of find, a hack, the word you don't like to use, but you did kind of find a workaround to overcome those flaws to help more accurately, bid based on the value of the actual terms themselves, not just the products that you're advertising. So That's super interesting. Okay, so I think what we'll do is we'll move on to Elliot, and at the end afterwards, we'll have a more expanded Q&A, because that way we know how much time we have, because we only have an hour for the session. So Elliot, whenever you're ready, feel free. You have control. Start presenting.
So share my screen here. And if everyone can see that, all right, we'll go ahead and get started. So first off, great presentation, Kirk. Thank you, Joel, for the introduction there. Lots of great information, definitely. Enjoyed hearing from you just specifically on attribution. That was really informative. I agree there. So what I'm going to speak about today is remarketing, and that's kind of the second step that we think you need to be looking at, and obviously working into your strategy as we ramp up for the holidays for 2018. So I want to begin with just kind of the cliche start of using a definition of remarketing. Now, we know that once we set up conversion tracking within Google Ads, we're basically ready to start creating our audiences and start remarketing. But I wanted to put this definition out there to kind of just illustrate how I like to think about remarketing specifically. So I really like to think of it as really unique and targeted groups of people who share really specific attributes based on how they've interacted with your brand. So I almost think of these as unique cohorts of users that are all really niche and highly targeted, and all really just share a bunch of commonalities with each other. Now, if you've been within the Google Ads interface in the audience section, you've seen all of those audiences that Google automatically creates for us. I've thrown a couple examples up here of just some really simple ones that they create. Now, they create other ones around e-commerce specifically, like shopping cart abandoners and product visitors and that sort of thing. But the main point I want to make here is in 2018, it's important that we understand that just someone visiting your website does not further qualify this user in any way to say they're interested in buying your product or they have a desire to buy your product. It's merely visiting a site. They could have visited a site for a couple seconds and bounced off. It's really just not very telling. And it's important that you understand this when you see these audiences that are already created in Google, and you think about visiting as a whole, and know that just someone visiting your site is not very informative at the end of the day. When you think about building your audiences, there's also a lot of tools that are available to us. So I'm going to focus a lot today on Google Ads specifically, but generally we like to recommend using Google Analytics with Tag Manager integration, which has much more capabilities in terms of remarketing off of behavior as opposed to visiting and that sort of thing. So these are just some of your options even within Google, but I've also included some examples outside of Google. So retargeting specific platforms like Criteo and AdRoll are also great options. Now, these platforms tend to require a much larger budget, but the capabilities of these platforms, they can get much more granular, and they tend to be very dynamic platforms that can be extremely effective if you have the right budget and you're able to kind of work with these platforms. So it's just important to understand there's a lot of options out there when you think about remarketing as a whole. So we have all of this data, right? We're gathering data every day on how our users are interacting with our ads and how our audiences are performing. We have lots of easy to use tools for creating audiences specifically. So why are we not leveraging these? And that's kind of what leads me into my main big idea for the presentation today. And what I hope is this approach can be taken back, whether you have never done remarketing in the past, or maybe you've done remarketing for years and you're looking for something else to kind of get the wheels turning in your brain. I think this approach can apply to many different circumstances, I guess you could say. So it's really a cyclical motion where you could even turn that circle around and look at it that way, where the cycle is layering, learning, and then testing, and then you kind of go back within the cycle. So layering, in my mind, is layering different qualifiers within your audiences to kind of further qualify that audience. So layers like demographics, visiting certain pages, had certain behaviors. There's a whole list of things you could go down in terms of adding layers to these audiences. And then from there, you can start to learn about these audiences and start to test them. So whether you've created an audience and are ready to apply it to campaigns and ready to start testing. Or maybe you just created some audiences and you want to just apply them to your campaigns with no bid adjustment and just start learning about them, even before you jump into testing. It's important just to understand, though, the cycle of continuing to learn and continuing to test new and different layers within your audiences. I've got a question from Monisha. I hope I'm saying that correctly. They ask, what is the role of AI in e-commerce marketing and in remarketing? So in my mind, that goes specifically with automated bidding, which I know has been a hot topic recently, just among a lot of different things across the paid sphere. But as for remarketing specifically and with audiences, the cool thing about automated bidding is generally when we apply audiences to campaigns, we apply them with, if you're just looking to apply them to a normal campaign, you can add bid adjustments and that sort of thing. Where automation, you don't really have to apply bid adjustments. We've learned that the automated bid strategies tend to take into account audiences that are applied to your campaigns. So it's important that if you're running automated bid strategies that you are utilizing audiences and you have well thought out audiences applied to your campaigns, because it can be really beneficial for the algorithm. So I hope that answers your question, but that's just kind of my two thoughts there. So moving on, I wanted to walk through just a very simple audience creation within Google Ads. So this is going to be very simple, but I really just wanted to, for those of you who maybe haven't created one in the past, just kind of see the thought process and what it looks like. So before you even get started creating your audience, you're going to want to think about your goals and think about that in terms of your product. So maybe you're trying to push a certain product. Is that a new product you're trying to push, or maybe a bestseller? You could think about your goals in terms of users. So is your goal right now to increase the lifetime value of certain users, or is it more to acquire new users and maximize that? Obviously, you can think about more in terms of your KPIs. So are you trying to maximize your revenue or really maximize, that return on ad spend within these campaigns? You're also going to want to think about your limitations. So whether you have a really long buying cycle or a short buying cycle for the product, that's going to influence how your audiences are created. So if you're selling clothing, that's going to be very different, and the user experience and process is going to be very different than if you're selling maybe appliances, for example. You're going to want to think about your limitations in terms of developer support as well. A lot of remarketing and advanced remarketing requires a certain amount of technical knowledge, code implementation, knowledge of working certain platforms. So you're going to want to think about if there's someone on your team or if you're able to learn some of these things. We all know there's unlimited resources online nowadays for free, so you can teach yourself a lot of these things even. And then finally, you're going to want to think about your design support limitations. So a lot of remarketing goes the route of display campaigns. Now, if you're utilizing display campaigns, are you using more automated solutions for ads from Google, or are you do you have any creative assets already at your disposal, or is that something you're going to have to think about outsourcing? So these are just some of the limitations that you should be aware of before you even get into creating your audiences. Now, just to walk through the simple creation here. When you go to your audiences in Google, you have a lot of options in terms of remarketing off of website visitors, YouTube users, app downloads, any of those. But we're going to focus today just on website visitors. And we're going to start with that base audience of all visitors. And I just want to show you how a couple layers into this audience can make that audience that much more granular and targeted for your users. So moving forward, you're going to come to this page when you click on website visitors where you have a lot of different options. Now, we're going to focus on that third option down today, where users visited one page but did not visit another page. So in this example, say we're selling electronics or headphones, and we want to include everyone in this audience who has visited a headphones page. So we'll say that URL contains headphones. And then we want to exclude anyone who has purchased from us in the past. So many times that URL is some sort of confirmation, thank you, something along those lines. So we'll put any URL we'll put anytime that user has visited a URL that contains thank you, we want them excluded from this audience. And then finally, within Google Ads, you're going to have one more layer that I wanted to just mention quickly in the audience creation, and that's what's called membership duration. Now, this is just the number of days that people are going to remain in your audience. So the big thing for me here is your budget and or not so much your budget, but your website traffic as a whole. This is mainly what you're going to want to tweak if you're having issues with audience size. So if you don't have a lot of audience traffic, you're going to have to open up that duration to a much longer time period where or if it's you have a lot of traffic, you can experiment with different date ranges there to figure out what works best. So that's yet another layer that you can begin testing and seeing what works best. And then finally, kind of as you're creating these audiences, almost in tandem or after you create them, you want to think about where these audiences fall within the funnel. So I have just an extremely simple e-commerce funnel up here where this audience that we just walked through creating, in my mind, falls somewhere in the mid to upper funnel range where, again, just because these users have visited our site does not qualify these users to be to desire buying our product or to really want to take action. All we know in this example is that these users have some sort of interest in headphones as a whole because they've been to our website and then they browse the headphones page. So that was just a quick example of an audience creation. Now, I want to walk through just some quick use cases, and I wanted to include several examples from varying industries and different goals. And the idea here is to kind of spawn some thinking that you can use and take back to your campaigns. So this first example, I'm glad Kirk mentioned RLSA because my first two examples are RLSA specific. And Kirk talked about it more in the bottom of funnel range. Now, my examples, I've got a upper funnel example and I've got a lower funnel example. So I think it'll be interesting to hear how RLSA can be effective in both instances. So for those who are unaware, RLSA basically is a regular search campaign, which is limited to a specific audience that you identify. So walking through this example, let's say we're selling workout equipment. And the goal here is really to push that user closer to purchase. So we're not necessarily trying to drive that final sale. This audience is going to sit somewhere in the mid to upper funnel. The audience itself is similar to that example we just walked through where they visited a treadmill page, for example, but we're also going to layer in the audience who, or the URL to exclude people who have converted on the site. So that audience is specifically people who have viewed treadmills and not purchased from us. Now, the targeting for this one, in my mind, trying out some broad product category keywords could be a great way to kind of cast a wider net, but also know that the user on the end of that is aware of your brand, and you can get a message in front of them that will really resonate with them. So an ad example for this is, now this is just a very bare bones ad example, but I really want you to focus on that first headline, or I guess both headlines, where in that first headline, we kind of identify the user and show the user that we are aware of the stage of the buying process they're at. So still browsing treadmills. And then we can provide maybe some additional content outside of just buying from us. So download our buyer's guide. So like with a product with like treadmills, it's a much longer buying process. So, slowly helping that user down the funnel, providing content from your brand can be a great way to kind of continue to push that user down the funnel, but, not just trying to drive that final sale in this instance. So the second example is going to be a much lower funnel audience, but again, it's going to be an RLSA example, but I wanted to showcase what's called customer match, which is essentially us providing first-party data to Google and then it matching it up with specific users. So in this example, let's say we're working in retail and we want to increase the lifetime value of our users. So our audience in this case would be, let's say we have a group of email subscribers who have signed up for our newsletter. And then we can add another layer in of users who have purchased jeans, for example, from us in the past. So we are sure this is a very low funnel audience because they are aware of the brand and they desire the brand because they're in our system currently and they're in our subscriber list. and they've also purchased from us in the past. So we know that they've desired the products enough to take action in the past. So in this example, let's say we're bidding on some competitor terms. So competitor terms can be very expensive and difficult to compete with when you're really focused on that direct return. So in this example, it's a great way to just kind of compete and know the user on the end of that ad is someone who is aware of your brand and in your system, I guess you could say. So again, a very simple ad here, but I want to focus again on the headline where we first identify the user. So, hey, grab yourself another pair, because we know the user has been in our system in the past. And then maybe we throw a coupon out there and say, hey, 20% off your next pair of jeans. And you can see how this messaging is really crafted in a way to really relate to that audience that is going to be receiving this ad. And you could sell reselling, or you could try reselling in this example. You could try cross-selling. There's a lot of different examples you could try just using kind of this customer match RLSA tactic. The final example I want to go through today is definitely the most involved example, which is called dynamic product remarketing. Now, this is going to require a certain amount of setup in terms of providing a feed within your merchant center. But outside of that, it is a pretty simple and straightforward campaign to create. You can use dynamic ads utilizing that personalized feed that I just mentioned to really get the goal with this campaign type is to get an image or the product that a specific user was viewing and show them that same product. I'm sure many of us have viewed products on different websites, and then we see ads of that same product on different websites we're viewing. So this is essentially what that is. So let's say our example, our industry is, let's say we're selling electronics. The goal would be here to really drive that final purchase. Let's say our audience is what's called cart viewers. So people who viewed an item, placed it in a cart, but we'd add that layer in of excluding people who have converted before, because again, we want to try to drive that final purchase. This is going to be a lower funnel audience because they've dropped out at some stage of the purchase process, or I guess the checkout process more so. So we are sure that they desired the product to some degree. Now, it's difficult to completely gauge that in this kind of general example, but now I want to show you just kind of what an ad would look like within this. So here's just a really simple ad. Now, again, where I want to focus is on the messaging, which is the one piece of these dynamic ads that you actually provide. Now, again, here we're showing the user that we know the stage of the process that they dropped out on, and then we can craft a message that is really meant to resonate with this audience. So, aren't you forgetting something? Come back to your cart. It's just how you left it. So, again, this is just a very quick example, but dynamic product remarketing can be a really effective campaign type to use, and I encourage you to test it out. So to leave you today, I just wanted to give you some quick next steps. So, small tweaks in your audiences can lead to really big wins in the end. So whether that's just adding a couple different layers within your audience or testing a couple different things, it can really lead to big dividends in the future. And you should start testing different things, tweaking different things, A/B testing audiences against each other. It can lead to some great results. You also want to always be remembering about the funnel. The funnel is your friend. So whenever you're thinking about your audience creation, you need to be thinking about the funnel. When you're thinking about where this audience falls within campaigns, you're going to want to think about the funnel. When you're crafting your message, you're even going to be thinking about the funnel. So just always keep it in the back of your mind. And then finally, just start learning. So as I mentioned earlier, the easiest thing that you can do right now is just apply your audiences to current campaigns you have and just start learning about them. Don't necessarily have to create new campaigns just around these audiences. You can learn a lot from them just within your current campaign set. So that leads me to the end of my portion of the presentation. So thank you all for your time. I definitely appreciate it. And I believe we are going to Q&A now.
Yes, we are. You did correctly. That was, also very informative. I, really like that. We do have, a few questions here. And by the way, everyone out there, if you do have anything you'd like to ask, feel free to put it into YouTube, and we'll address it accordingly. One question that I have is regarding how to handle demographic reporting where the results are coming from unknown. in demographic reporting, you have different age groups and also the different genders. And then you have a bucket that's labeled as unknown. What do you do with that?
In my experience, it's not something you could ignore, because every time I've encountered it, it is usually the largest of the data sets. So at the end of the day, you're really never going to get a window into that. It kind of lives in the black box of Google that, in my mind, you're just never going to understand it. So you can definitely test different things and segment your demographics still to learn how it performs based on different messaging. But outside of that, there's nothing you can, I guess, directly draw from the unknown, because you're just never going to get too much of a window into that.
Okay. Okay. So it just is, but it's pretty much like everything grouped together from users who Google doesn't understand because they're maybe not logged into Gmail or
Correct. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Like they haven't determined who they are. Maybe they're incognito. Okay, that's good to hear. I have a question for Kirk. How long does the query filtering strategy in shopping ads generally take before seeing results?
That's a very good question. I've seen it take a few months. I've seen it take like 2 days. So some of that might be how much data you have. You know, how quickly. So one actual thing that I work sometimes when I have a longer presentation on this is noting that if you already have a very established account, I would, if you have an established account that's really converting well, I would actually be a little hesitant to just kind of blow up the strategy and organization and change it. There probably are ways that you can test like one brand of product or one category or something like that in this, where you can test that and kind of work things out over time. And so that might be a time where it takes a little longer. So yeah, it kind of depends. What I have seen is it really is something that does grow over time, because the more data that you get behind you, the more you're identifying, oh, these queries work great, these queries work in this ad group, they don't work in that. Like the more that you just are kind of doing that, it's I like to say it's kind of like a 747 taking off. It's not going to get off the ground as quickly as maybe like a little Cessna that can just zip up there, but man, you're going to soar high and you're going to soar far when you finally kind of when you just keep getting it up there. So there's a lot of power, I think, in that.
Okay, that's a good answer there. Okay, and I have a question actually, again regarding retargeting. Can you segment purchase conversions by an amount for retargeting? They sell this, viewer sells free samples. So with excluding people who have reached your excluding people who have reached a thank you page won't work.
Yeah, so I believe that's an option within Google Analytics. So I mentioned Google Analytics having much more robust capabilities in terms of the specifics of what you're retargeting to. So I'm not positive on what it would be labeled as when you go into the audience creation within Analytics. My mind is saying custom dimensions. Now, I'm not positive if that's correct or not, but I know it's possible to kind of say, okay, value is greater than X. I want to exclude this. I know it is possible. So I point you in the direction of Google Analytics for that one.
Okay. That's a good answer there. I've actually done it myself, and also I've used events and so on to kind of, like label users and then exclude them and so on. Okay, another question regarding remarketing. What time frame do you favor for remarketing? It obviously depends on the product, but have you seen, and also of course the stage the user is and the decision-making funnel, but have you seen a cutoff point where remarketing loses its meaningful edge?
So yeah, you're definitely correct there in getting the canned response of it depends, but generally I haven't seen many remarketing audiences much over 3 to 6 months be super effective. Now that just might be the accounts I've worked in and the experience I have, but I definitely think it is heavily reliant on the price of your product and just the buying cycle for your product. So maybe you're selling like a service or a class or something that's a much larger purchase. Now I'd start your testing at a further range there. So I don't have a hard and fast rule on this is your cutoff, but if it's a 3-month buying cycle, I might start at a month or start at 45 days and then do some increments from there.
Okay. Okay, that's a good answer. Okay, I have something else for Kirk. Shouldn't the skew or high value search terms be filtered into the high priority campaign and shopping ads? You said those go in low priority. Can you explain further?
Yeah, good question. So that trips up basically everyone, including myself, when you first kind of hear this strategy. So that's where think of the priority, think of the high, medium, low priority, not in terms of like what you care about, but how Google is going to arrange who gets what. Okay, so it's not, you're not designating value with those. So the high priority campaign just means that's like the first campaign. That's that top coffee filter I said. That's actually that's the one that collects the junk, if you will. So everything all comes in off the top. Just every random query that Google wants to assign all hits that top campaign, the quotation marks high priority campaign. Because you're telling Google that's the one I want you to look at first. That way, that's going to get the low bids. That's where you want your generic queries, because you want them to get stuck there, basically. So you want your generic queries to get stuck in the high priority campaign so that your higher value queries can filter down into the next ones where you've bid them higher.
Okay.
It's confusing.
Okay, but it makes sense when you start to actually see a run and when you start getting really into the campaigns and the results and you're watching it all the time, everything kind of falls into place. It's something you have to experience to really truly appreciate and understand. I have one viewer here who's asking, does targeting flexible reach have to be set on the campaign level in RLSA? They once had a case where targeting flexible reach was set on an ad group level. The campaign set to observations and did not work correctly.
It needs to be set according to whatever, like if you have ad group level audiences, then you need to set your ad group flexible reach. If you have campaign level audiences, you need to set campaign level flexible reach.
Okay. Okay, that's pretty good. I have another question here. This is a little bit similar to what we talked about, what was asked earlier regarding the time frames. What do you do regarding ad fatigue? Like sometimes your marketing campaigns run, users see the ads, and sometimes they see them so much that user engagement drops and so on. Do you cap frequency and impressions? And if so, what information do you use to determine how you cap as far as the ad frequency goes?
Yeah, so I do generally set frequency caps. Now, ad fatigue specifically, I generally experience more ad fatigue looking in social. But yeah, frequency capping is definitely something I would start testing. Now, I include that in the bucket of when I talk about different layers you can add in and test in. Frequency capping is just another one of those layers. So I would judge it in your performance how you would any other layer you're testing. So whether you're it's a more upper funnel and you're looking more at your front end metrics, or you're really just looking at a lower funnel audience, you can focus more on your back end metrics and those KPIs to kind of judge the performance there. But yeah, I'd say it's just another layer that you can test. Now, you also have to think about your messaging there as well. So when you have an audience at 7 days, 14, and 30, that audience is going to be receptive to different messaging depending on how long ago they interacted with your brand. So just another piece of that puzzle as well to think about when you're testing different frequency caps. As for what frequency cap you should start with, I think that has to do with your budget and your traffic and how those work together. So if you have a really small budget, but you want to reach as many users as possible, you might need to lower that frequency cap to kind of maximize the amount of users you're touching. But so you can think about it in terms of budgets, but that's kind of my 2 cents on frequency capping.
Yeah, when you're saying that you might use a different message, are you suggesting to run different ads to try to reduce ad fatigue?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like different ads in the same list?
Yeah, absolutely. And you do need to be careful, though, about how many elements you're testing at one time. So if you're trying to first figure out, okay, what is the sweet spot for the date range or the membership duration in my audience, you can test for that first. And then you can start thinking about the messaging within that. If you try to test your messaging along with different layers within an audience, it can get really messy to actually figure out what is driving the good performance within that. So I'd say stick to one element at a time, but yes, definitely test different creative in there.
Would you run those ads in the same groups and maybe like have them rotate based on setting the frequency capping to be limited by views per ad as opposed to views per campaign?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that's a great route to go. We all know that when we put ads within campaigns and hit the evenly rotate button, and then Google still decides to make one win, that's something that you're probably going to have to fight a little bit. But yeah, you can definitely go the route of kind of limiting the ad itself in the frequency capping.
Okay. Okay, great. And I have something for Kirk. You were talking a lot about attribution modeling. Do you have anything that you would call your favorite model? Like, what do you prefer?
Google, I almost said AdWords. Google Ads is DDA is intriguing to me. So that's their data-driven model, and so basically the data-driven model is them saying, hey, we're looking at all of the stuff that's happened in your account, and we're kind of attributing value based upon our algorithms. Okay. The problem with that is that it's single channel. It's only Google Ads. So huge problem in my opinion, but I like the idea of it. So I think ultimately probably something like a DDA that's multi-channel, where it is bringing in factors kind of that on Google's back end, they're seeing all this stuff, they're bringing all that in and making that decision, I would think probably is going to help us get a little more accurate. If we're just looking at just kind of the basic, here are the basic models that are out there. Aaron Levy wrote a fantastic article, by the way, if you're just kind of interested in being introduced to attribution models. Aaron Levy wrote an article, I believe, on Search Engine Land, having to do with, I think it's titled something like "What PPC Attribution Model is Best" or something like that. And I think of the default options we have, I personally like position-based the best, the best of the not great options, if you will. So that position-based is U-shaped. That basically assigns higher value to first and last click with some level of value in the middle clicks, lower value in the middle clicks.
Okay. Okay, good answer there. And I have someone asking a question about display ads remarketing. Would you, this user saying that he's using display ads for remarketing, would you recommend advertising on certain platforms like Facebook, YouTube more than other platforms? They're in a very niche travel industry, and she's asking if there's maybe somewhere where they can get a lot of data on which platform is maybe better than others.
Yeah, so I'll take the first part of that. I feel like there is some resources there. I don't know if either of you two have something off the top of your head for the second part, but generally when I'm looking at display retargeting, again, I think about the funnel and what your capabilities are. So if you're really trying to drive that purchase, I'd say focus on Google Analytics and Google Ads. You can build, some more dynamic product remarketing display campaigns within there that can be really effective and really drive those final sales. Now, if you're looking for more top of funnel and trying to fill that funnel, maybe you can look to some other platforms like, or I guess other channels like YouTube or that sort of thing. I've done some campaigns within YouTube to kind of retarget based on, I don't know if you call this retargeting, but using lookalike audiences. So it's using audiences of past converters or really a good seed audience. And you can use this to kind of fill that top of funnel. Now there's places you can use that within YouTube, within Facebook even. So I think there's ways in every platform to hit different parts of the funnel. It's just kind of looking into those and figuring out what your capabilities are and what you're able to do.
Okay. Great, and of course, this isn't your marketing efforts aren't limited necessarily to one channel. If you're let's say you're advertising and you're driving traffic to your site for your through shopping campaigns, you could always bring back users with remarketing from Facebook and so on, because it isn't just all compartmentalized. It's everything's holistic. It all kind of flows into each other. People are on Facebook more than anything else these days, so. If they're done searching and they're done on your site, they might not necessarily be browsing on websites where you could serve ads through the GDN. Okay, I think we have like another minute left. Do we have any other questions or anything else that you guys might want to add?
I don't really have anything. The last kind of point, and maybe I'd add on to just your little blurb, that I agree with what you added onto that question. But yeah, I agree. Definitely use your multiple channels, but also make sure that your messaging between these channels is well integrated. I think that's also the key here when you're using multiple channels. So when you're thinking about the funnel and how these channels fit together, focus on that messaging and focus on how it needs to differ depending on where they fall in the funnel, and that all of them are kind of working together and more cohesive. It's just one extra thought there, but yeah, that's
well,
that's
one really
all
quick, well, one little quick thing like that. What about branded search? About how branded search fits into it? Because that is, people are searching for you, like while they're deciding, they might be on the fence, they might be ready to buy, and then they run a search for your actual brand. Like, how do you relate that to the whole process?
Generally, I see branded search as it's in a lot of the accounts I'm running right now. It seems to be really just that last final conversion area. Now, there's things you can do within your remarketing within your branded campaign. So maybe you want to always show a returning user a coupon when they search your branded ad. So there's interesting little things you can do within your branded search, but that's kind of what's coming to my mind right now.
Okay. Of course, and there's also a caveat to that, because like, let's say the website that you're marketing is an online service like Semrush. People may be searching for Semrush just because they want to go to semrush.com, and your ads aren't going to work for them necessarily. Okay, Kirk, is there anything you'd like to add as well before we sign off?
I think, let's see, you had mentioned something about automated bidding. One brief note on some of Google's automated bidding tools, just to be aware of with shopping. Definitely test them, test target ROAS, test enhanced CPC. I have found, especially with target ROAS, I've found that it, like, I don't know, I feel like there's situations where it's awesome. It'll outperform. I have definitely discovered during really peak type situations, Labor Day jump, Black Friday jump, you do have to be a little careful about some of those automated solutions, because especially if you're in an industry that really changes drastically for a quick day like that, you might find the algorithms are struggling to know what's going on and keep up. So
Yeah, of course, because it's all done in historical data. So if there's a big change if there's a big trend change,
exactly,
it's going to be drastic, which is something we see regularly, especially in the travel industry. That's a difficult one. I know we have someone watching here who isn't that. Okay, so I think that's about it today. We're 2 minutes over, which is fine, and it was very, very, very good for me. It was very insightful. I'm sure it is for everyone else out there. And yeah, it was a lot of fun, and look forward to speaking to you guys again.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.